Welcome back, friends. So let's go to the reading for this evening. June 28th, Kriyanandaji writes, "To overcome the temptation to tell tales on others, tell good ones on yourself." Very simple, beautiful, brief reading. To overcome the temptation to tell tales on others, tell good ones on yourself. And of course, you can see, as I mentioned in the beginning, it's a light statement, and he's not putting it out very strongly, but we will discuss, a tale, as they say. Once there was a person in Mount Washington whose habit it was once in a while to start a rumor. And, Yogananda ji, especially, being the spiritual guide that he was, it was his responsibility to help people overcome whatever they were struggling with. And sometimes this fellow would not hesitate to start even a strong rumor about others. So a rumor reached Yogananda ji one time, and basically he immediately started another rumor. Master started a rumor against this fellow. And you know what it happens? Yogananda ji used to say, a rumor, if you give it a good 24-hour start, it can go on for eternity. And so soon this rumor reached the fellow, and he was so furious. He came up to Yogananda ji and he said, "Somebody has started this rumor against me and it's totally wrong." And Master said, "I know." He said, "But do you remember of that one and then this rumor?" And basically in private, Master told him that I know you started those rumors, and by the way, this one was started by me. That he was trying to make him feel what it means. So the point is that when a tale can be a very simple thing, which we tell our children. They can be, of course, uplifting. But here Swamiji is talking of the tale that we like to paint a picture around a person, and for some light moments, it's all right. Maybe especially in the presence of somebody, you say, "Oh, you remember that funny thing that happened to you?" I remember recently meeting, a friend of mine, and each time I meet him, there is something which is so crazy that happens in his life. You might say he's got that kind of karma, and he was recently telling me that, he was very proud of being a good driver. Men, especially when they, in a family, they say, "Okay, I'm the best driver." And he said, "Once I parked my car somewhere in Italy, had a wonderful meeting, then I told somebody, okay, I really, really have to go. It's time, I have something very important." And he said, "In my busyness, I forgot that where I had parked the car was at a piazza. It was basically the end of the road. And how it happens, we parked the car in one or the other gears. So he had to move back, but the car was parked in the forward moving first gear. And the moment he started it and he moved ahead, he didn't have much chance. And basically, he said, I came down almost 8 feet, and there I was, for the rest of the day dealing with that situation." But again and again, something or the other happens. And so that's a good way of telling a tale. That's a funny way, You ask somebody, "Hey, can you repeat that story? It was so funny." But on the other hand, we should not take it too far, because tales can soon become rumor, as I said. Rumor can hurt reputation. It can become gossip, which Yogananda ji was very strictly against. And he said that is not good for the person who is saying it, certainly does no good about whom we are gossiping. So let me share a few things and stories, first on the lighter side, and then perhaps why we should be very careful of this very subtle, you might say, practice, So Kriyananda ji, I remember once I was in a meeting where quite a few of us were there, and there was a very young devotee meeting Swamiji. And the person was very nervous, and she was saying, "I'm quite nervous." And Swamiji was saying, "Oh, there's nothing to be nervous. I'm your friend." And I was so amazed and touched. I was myself very new on the path, but I was amazed to see how he was interacting with somebody who had literally walked into the ashram a couple days ago. And the person said, "Okay, yes, I think you're my friend." And it was a very sweet interaction. Then Swami said, "By the way, what are your hobbies?" And the person said, "Oh, I play tennis, I do some running, and I love cooking for my friends." And Swami said, "You know what happened with me once? I was in school and I was playing tennis with my friend, and I tried to show him which one of us was better. And he said, when it came my turn, to hit a forehand. He said, I swung the racket so far that he said, I missed the ball completely, but the racket certainly found my nose. And he said, then I was sitting on the court with a bleeding nose. But he said, I was laughing because I knew that I had tried to, outshine my friend for no reason. And I was paying the price, you might say, for it. And this person just cracked up. And then Swami said, another time I was in the sports field. And later on, people were literally worshipping me because I won them a tournament. But I tell you, friends, he was saying, this person, he said, I tell you, the way I was running with that rugby ball, I didn't actually intend to make a leap. It's just that my lace got stuck in the shoe and I tripped. And he said, in that tripping, nobody could, you might say, calculate my move. I tripped in such a way that I lurched across the finishing line and our team won, and everybody said, that was such a wonderful dive you made. So in that way, the person opened up and then they had some discussions. And I was witnessing that. For a while I thought it was a wastage of his time. But that devotee is still on the path. And I think that was perhaps the only personal meeting she had. We were all there, many of us, but that personal moment with him. So on one level, Kriyananda ji used to say that, when people are feeling slightly strange, tell a good, of course, certainly don't pick on them. That's the worst, you're bullying them then. But as a friend, as he said, I'm your friend. And then very quickly he moved into these stories and they developed a connection. In my own case, I've seen friends that over the years, I've started doing classes. And just before this webinar, somebody was telling me, you're reading your notes. I thought you don't need preparation. And I said, oh no, every time you have to prepare and you have to go through some points. At least I have to. And at that time, I was reminded that years ago, almost 15 years ago, I was in college, 16 years ago actually, 17, sorry. And I was in college and biochemistry was one of my subjects. I was not strong in that. And guess what happens when you're afraid of something? The teacher one day came up and she said, tomorrow I want to take a leave. I will be sitting in the audience, but could 3 students volunteer to take up the class? Out of 120, 3 is not a big number. There were many more, I think, who could have raised their hands. Surprisingly, for almost 3-4 seconds, nobody volunteered. But in those few moments, my heart started racing. I said, I hope she doesn't pick me. Never. Biochemistry, I will not. And that too in front of people, I thought I was nervous. I thought I'm not confident. But just then, fortunately, a thought came to me. What's there to be afraid of? And how long are you going to water this seed of fear? And just almost subconsciously raised my hand. I said, I'll do it. And my friends who knew I was not good, they're like, biochemistry, really? And I said, what's there? I'll prepare, I'll give it a try. I'll at least overcome. I was doing it actually for myself. Likewise, another time, this was on a bigger stage in front of the hundreds of people. But fortunately, I found a worthy, I was not participating in other activities, but I found a reason to talk about, an accident which I had seen on the road where nobody was helping. And I thought because it's such a big gathering, maybe I could speak about it. And, it was close to my heart. And I was able to. I got slightly, emotional about it, but that is also a learning lesson. So when people tell me that, oh, you are giving a talk nowadays for half an hour, 20 minutes, I often tell them that I've had to work in that direction. I have to prepare, I have to meditate, you have to think. So again, it is good for us to always have, that compassion and to help other people. But then on the other hand, Swamiji said that you should do that. Now, of course, he's talking of a lighter moment, a lighter story. But looking back, I was reading his advice how to share those stories. He said, share them with calmness and with a sense of dignity. He said, because you're also trying to help yourself in that situation. And I remember, as much as Swami could, lighten the moment, he was also very dignified about it. He said, it's okay actually. He said, one should once in a while give others a chance to laugh, at oneself, because it loosens the grip of the ego, which is actually the whole reason why he has written that. But then he said, but don't allow them to laugh at you too long. And then he mentioned the drawback. He said, if you look at the personal lives of many comedians, he says they are quite unhappy actually. And he says part of the reason is they allow people to laugh a bit too much on themselves, and that once again draws the attention to our ego. If we are of course talking down at somebody or pointing out their mistakes, being judgmental about them, now that is the higher side, the lesser or the baser side of what he was saying. Yoganandaji was pointing out that exposing somebody or judging them or painting a picture of them, which friends on the spiritual path, remember this, we are none of these things which we are enacting in the moment. We are having personalities, but Swamiji said the goal of the spiritual path is actually to renounce our ego, our personality. That need not be seen as a sad goal to attain. Actually, just this evening I got the news of one very dear friend. She was very elderly, close to 90, and she passed away, last month, but I came to know only this evening. And I was for a moment thinking about what is life really. She was she never married, and she was in touch with many of us in the ashram. But then I was thinking that I asked her caretaker who was with her in that moment, and there was hardly any relatives at that age. All her relatives had passed away, and she said, "Oh, I did the final rites," and she passed away with a smile, happily. But then I was thinking that end is coming to each of us. But if we don't have that understanding or joy or even the desire to actually not invite death, but to want to move on the other side with the understanding that I'm renouncing a limitation of the body, of my ego, of limited interaction with people. How much can you really love people outwardly in the world? Not at all much. Actually, if you do it too much, there's a misunderstanding. Swami used to say that if you have really a pure intention to help others in today's times, many times people think, why is he or she, behaving so kindly towards me? I'm sure they have an ulterior motive and they're not talking about it right now. So on one level, we cannot, express ourselves outwardly, but then bringing the point back to ego, which is what we are trying to renounce when we tell tales on ourselves. And when, let's say, I was talking of faced with death or the limitation of this life, it is very good to understand that we are not the personalities we are living. The others who we are seeing, they are not those things. And it is God has created this Leela. It was His will to live through many, to again, find Himself through many. So we should always pick it up from that highest thread. Even the small things, tragic things, it is good to pick it up from that thread. Otherwise, Yoganandaji said there is simply no explanation otherwise for all the suffering we see in this world, all the bad behavior you see. He says it has to be in the end a dream. So now I would like to share another story from Swamiji's life. This was, perhaps you heard it, when he would say that I used to smoke. And he said, but I gave up smoking by affirming. And you would see, I've seen many people who have derived great strength because it is a great story. Other times he would say that in past lives, Yoganandaji told him in this life that in the past, Swamiji had many doubts. I think he used to repeat that story not because he needed to overcome those. He had worked this entire life to overcome that and had overcome it. But he would share it so that we who were going through doubts could basically again, find how, because he used to say through love. Another time I remember reading this story where Yoganandaji, when he reached America, his first disciple was Dr. Lewis. And see how life tests you. Master had a beautiful friend in Dr. Lewis, but one time somebody spread a strange rumor about Master to Dr. Lewis. And Dr. Lewis said, I knew somewhere that it is not true, but he said, I couldn't help being affected by it. And somewhere it was, like burrowing inside me. And Yoganandaji in that moment was actually driving across, I think in Boston, across another street. And he suddenly changed his direction. He walked up to Dr. Lewis's office, looked at him straight in the eye, and he said, "Do you still love me, doctor?" And Dr. Lewis said, "I was shaken, but I looked back at him and I said, 'Of course, I love you the same.'" And Master says, "Good." And then Master said, "You've been needing some money which you loaned to somebody long time ago, isn't it?" And Dr. Lewis said, "Yes." He said, "I was quite surprised Master brought that up in that moment." And he says, "Go to that fellow now and you will get all your money." And he got the money. The interesting thing was that, first of all, it was a lesson in loyalty. But friends, also remember what I was speaking, that we are not these stories or personalities. When we spread a gossip about somebody, a rumor, or perhaps share a story which we are not even sure about if it happened that way, we are giving into untruthfulness. Whereas the truth is, we are all children of God, temporarily going through this pilgrimage, you might say, together. So when we give into untruthfulness, Swami says, you're creating a false reality and it doesn't help you. It doesn't help the person. What are the other disadvantages, on the other hand, of perhaps, telling tales on other people? One, if we are intentionally talking about somebody, somewhere we have a feeling that we are superior. And Master said, do not have superiority complex nor inferiority complex. Be balanced in your nature. We can have a judgmental attitude. If we repeat a story about someone too often, Swamiji says, in your mind at least, you would have stereotyped the person. And even if they are making a very strong effort to transform themselves and are progressing, he said, at least you won't be able to feel it, because in your mind you're biased towards them. Now this is a very important advice, even you might say, for teachers and parents, because sometimes we think, oh this child is like that and the other is like that. Now it's good to have that understanding. It is good to have discrimination, because then you can really help. But to get into a habit where we are sharing, that doesn't help us, it doesn't help them. What really helps? Perhaps counsel that person in a very subtle way, and this is a principle we teach to our teachers in our Living Wisdom schools. Find a solution to that problem. If somebody has a nature perhaps which is selfish, instead of talking to others about it, or to them, or punishing them, those are such ineffective ways. Find a way in which you can make them taste the joy of overcoming that habit. Yoganandaji used to love telling this habit, because Swamiji said it's actually a temptation. Why is it a temptation? Because we all are bound by the ego. The ego has come from a very long journey. Master said through plant kingdom, animal kingdom, but even as human beings, Swamiji said we slowly evolve in our consciousness, slowly refine our consciousness, and initially the ego is always thinking about itself. So when it comes time to talk about somebody, we often tend to downplay perhaps their good actions. So that's a temptation. There's a habit over there. Yoganandaji used to say, how do you overcome any habit? How do you overcome the temptation? Of course, over here Swami is saying, loosen your own ego by telling stories about yourself, and you will take others also lightly. On the other hand, Master said there was once a rich man who visited a farmhouse. And there he found the farmer, and the farmer said, "Sir, thanks for dropping in. I just made this cake. This is the best cake in the world." And this rich man said, wow, he took a piece of it, and it was fine. It was okay. Actually, it was quite dry, Master said, and had little taste. And this fellow said, you should come by. Thanks for your sweet gesture. Why don't you come to my house one day? And when this farmer came to his house, the man said, would you like to taste this cake? And the cake was much better. The farmer himself said that. And the rich man said, they had become friends by this time. The rich man said, I didn't want to tell you that day that your cake was not the best in the world. He said, but today you have found that this cake is better than yours. Similarly, when you find yourself in a temptation to judge somebody, judging is very harmful also because the way the law in this universe is created, if we judge anyone, see friends, many times, every time actually, people are all struggling with their challenges, they are trying to overcome. Yogananda ji said the privacy of our mind was given to us by God so that we could introspect and constantly improve ourselves. If somebody confides in you, if you can even clearly see through somebody's mistakes, have compassion, have kindness, see how in a gentle way, perhaps you don't have to even involve yourself in helping them. Perhaps you know somebody else. Again, we do this in our schools. If you see a child needs help, sometimes they are more open to being helped by one of their friends rather than, you might say, by the headmaster with whom they are perhaps afraid. So see how you can cultivate or nurture those kind of bonds and friendships, and you will see people come out of it. So this is how, Swamiji was saying that now we can help other people. By doing this, he said, you will overcome your own ego. You will see by sharing lighter stories, tales about yourself, by reflecting on your own progress. Swami says you will see that that is the whole basis of compassion, because we have gone through something, we can relate to other people's reality. That is a very necessary part of our lives and spiritual growth. And Swami says thereby we loosen the grip of the ego. One last question. How important is it to overcome the ego? Now maybe in the world people will say, that is my best friend, that's how I define myself. Actually, I want to sharpen my ego. I want to work on it, polish it, and express that and present it to people, because that's who I am. Again, once we are tired of that and we are bruised by some of those pitfalls that the ego finds itself in, then we say, oh my goodness, in my right mind, I could never be just this limited ego, not knowing anything almost. What does the ego really know? In our mind, intellectual mind, how much do we really know? Like some wise scientist said, the more I get to know about the universe, the more I realize how little I know. So again, overcoming the ego is very necessary. How do you know you are an ego? The heart feels shrunken. There is a restlessness when we say something which is self-appreciating, perhaps increasing our sense of self-importance. And we don't find ourselves surrounded by good friends. We find ourselves alone. And then we say, that maybe it's a wrong direction I have taken. And finally, when we start moving in the opposite direction, we find a sense of freedom, a sense of fearlessness, a sense of oneness with other people. We are able to truly help people through counseling, through involving them in some work, through encouragement, through overseeing. I remember Jyotishji once said, in a spiritual community, it is very almost necessary to be partly blind, deaf and dumb, which is to say, it's okay. If somebody is going through a bad phase, give them that time and space. We all have needed that, and through life we will always need that kind of support from our Guru Bhais. God bless you. Have a nice week, and thanks for joining. We hope to see you in the future webinars. Jai Guru.